Yep, says it there now.
Laura, are you here? Not yet. I still don't have the option, Laura. Jennifer, let me know when you're done so that I can become again the host and check that option.
It says that the webinar is now live streaming on YouTube. Does that mean we're all live on YouTube now?
No, it's Jennifer that is testing it.
Yes, I'm
right?
testing it, but it's private, so no one can see it. It's just for me to test to set the live streaming in place before we start the webinar.
Okay. Oh, there's Aoife. Hi, Aoife.
Okay, I'm making you host again, Luska, right?
Yep.
And we're live already.
No, we're not.
It's Claudia says we are.
No, I'm
she's
asking
It's
because
Jennifer
it says live on
testing.
YouTube.
It's on
Oh, yeah.
YouTube, yes, because I won't be able to start the live stream once I give the host set function of Zoom back to Luska. So I already started it. I don't think anyone is watching, and it will be good for the webinar.
But we never know, so.
So behave. And smile.
You know me too well, Lushka.
Okay, you should be back host now, Luska.
Many
Yes,
thanks,
I
Jennifer.
am good. I still don't have the option Laura mentioned, but I think that's not a problem anyhow.
Okay, I'll be back in a minute, but I'll start again sharing already my screen so that we have our nice slides ready. Okay. Is Liuska still there?
I am still there.
It's
I
just to
put the
check.
video off.
Yes. Yeah, it's just to ask you, are you starting the recording? Or will I start the recording?
No, I will do that. I will do
Perfect.
that.
Okay, I'll be back in a minute.
I'm going to log out and log back in again. My computer is after freezing on me.
Okay, 3 minutes to go. Catherine, are you okay? Okay.
one quick thing I wanted to ask, how long does each panelist have to speak? Does anyone know?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear well the question. How long?
Each panelist has to speak?
I'm not sure I understood it. I'm sorry. Maybe
Christian,
someone else.
Christian, it's for Christian, the question, because he's
okay.
moderating the session. How long each panelist will have, how much time they will have to make their intervention?
Well, in total, it is for half an hour for everybody, so it is 5 minutes and minutes at most for everybody to answer all questions.
Christian,
Okay.
there is a problem with your audio.
Yeah, you sound very.
It sounds very
Julia?
fuzzy.
Hi, so I see Elise. Elise is already
Can you hear me now?
joined. Yeah.
Yes, you can hear me now. I'm sorry, it is something with my microphone. It got turned off. Since it is half of hour for all the questions in the panel, then I would say it is at most 5 minutes that each of the panelists can speak in total. But this can be divided in answering shortly on every question.
Okay, thanks.
Maybe just to clarify.
Okay, I think that we have already 53, 55, plenty of participants that are joining. So maybe, yeah, let's wait another minute, but we are live. Okay, as I see that participants, more and more participants are joining us, and as we have quite a short time to discuss many interesting things, I would like to welcome you to this event, where in introducing our new strategy for the upcoming years, we will talk about bridging policymaking and human experiences with a set of inspiring speakers. For over 35 years now, Mental Health Europe has led the mental health movement across Europe, taking a human rights recovery-based approach. And we feel that the launch of this new strategy is really timely, as there is a need to reinforce a psychosocial and recovery approach. This is really urgent to counterbalance an over-reliance on a medical model of mental health, which is at risk of being further exacerbated by the current pandemic. But before giving the floor to our first speaker, I will have to give you some brief housekeeping rules. So first of all, the webinar is being recorded for your information. And then there will be two ways in which you can communicate, the chat that some of you have already discovered, and that is where, if you are experiencing any technical problem, please write it there, and we will have a person from our team, Fatima, that will be there to support you. Through the presentations today, there will be moments where some questions will be answered. As we go, please type your question in the Q&A box that you should all be able to access. And then when the time for the question and answer comes, we will go through them and we will try to answer as many as possible. So just to show you what is today's agenda, we start with a keynote speech on our strategy. Then we will have a panel discussion and then some very brief closing remarks. So now, without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Catherine Brogan, who is Mental Health Europe President and also the Deputy CEO of Mental Health Ireland. Catherine, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Claudia, and good morning, everyone. You're so welcome to such an exciting day for Mental Health Europe and its wide network of organisations to the launch of the first long-term co-produced strategy titled Bridging Policymaking and Human Experiences. I'm delighted to be able to bring you, so my role is going to be to bring you through the process of how we came to today and how we developed this long-term strategy and what our hopes are for the next 3 years for advancing mental health, well-being and recovery across Europe. And I'm very lucky to have Claudia here, who's going to move the slides forward for me. So if we've learned anything in the last 18 months is that the pandemic has definitely shone a light on mental health across the world. There's a dawning now, I think, on all of us, although we always said it, that clear dawning has hit us that there is no health without mental health. And Mental Health Europe strategy, whose co-production began about a year ago, could not come at a better time for us all. The pandemic affected everyone's mental health. Sorry, do you want to go back there, Claudia, please? Thank you. The pandemic affected everyone's mental health and well-being. Our mental health services were severely impacted. And those who kind of were impacted most were people who have long-term mental health challenges. It's time for action and for the EU strategies and policies to be implemented. And Mental Health Europe will be there to provide the support and the guidance that's necessary to do that. So when we started to look at how the strategy might evolve, the first thing we had to do was to ask ourselves the question, well, what's our unique value here? So we are in existence for 35 years. So we have that experience, but we also have 74 organizations across 33 countries who feed into this family of mental health. We've always had the approach of human rights, underpinned by the United Nations Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. We're striving for that psychosocial stroke recovery approach to mental health so that we can see mental health as it is. It's a human experience. We all have mental health, and at any one time, any one of us can be impacted by things that are happening in our environment that may cause us to have mental health challenges. And we do pride ourselves on the fact that we hold that independence from any health-related or commercial interests and our funding coming from other industries. Thanks, Claudia. So our new vision going into the next 3 years will be a Europe where everyone's mental health and well-being will flourish across their life course. So we're setting ourselves a high bar and a strong aspiration, but we are at nothing if we don't aspire to have the best possible outcome for everyone who lives in our communities, in our society, and individuals. Next there, Claudia. So the outcomes. So in order for us to realize what we needed to do and to create the plan and to set out the actions, we first had to look and say, where do we want to be in the next 3 years? What would it look like? How are we going to achieve this? So we began that process by asking ourselves where we wanted to be and what we wanted to achieve. So this is what we came up with, these areas: substantial improvement on the recognition of the adherence to human rights, increased adoption across our European countries of that psychosocial recovery approach, improving availability and access that's equitable, recovery orientated and community based in the services that we provide. What can I say about experts by experience is that we are nothing without the people who know most, the people who experience mental health challenges, the family members and supporters of people who experience mental health challenge. We are stronger together. So this is a key area for us, and co-creation or co-production is what will lead that for us. We will continue to reduce the mental health stigma and discrimination. And some of the ways we currently do that are through our European Mental Health Week, which we are hoping to expand to a month, and also through the series of booklets that we co-produce to make available for people so there's a greater understanding of mental health. And we are not at nothing if we don't continue to evolve and strengthen the Mental Health Europe organisational sustainability and impact. Thank you, Claudia. If you want to move on to the next slide, please. So given that we had those identified, so in 3 years' time, this is where we want to be, we needed to look up and say, well, what's our approach going to be to achieve that? So the key areas of, we've always been advocating. We're advocating all the time, but I think now we're at a crossroads where our advocacy can strengthen because we're adopting a new way of working in relation to co-creation. Continuing to raise that awareness of and communication so that we will disseminate more widely the work that we do. Begin to look better at better ways of educating a much larger public around what mental health is. Not to fear mental health, to embrace it. Capacity building is absolutely paramount. The more capacity we can build as an organization, the more we can achieve together. We know ourselves, you have to research. We need to constantly research, build an evidence base, demonstrate good practice, and indeed develop new practices that we can share across our network of members, but also into the European Parliament. And partners and coalitions. We're at nothing on our own. We need to expand those partnerships. We need to expand our collaborations, and we need to continue to evolve so that we can provide the best information and the best advice and guidance around mental health service provision, mental health promotion and recovery. Claudia, please. So that led us on then to what our strategy priorities were going to be. And I think I've seen this in my own organisation where we're just about to launch our strategy. Priority areas are much better than goals, because goals you're constantly trying to achieve. With priorities, you're setting something in stone to say, these are the specific priorities that we are going to. We know what lane we are going to be working in. The first one is that continuation of the human rights-based approach. And one of the areas we'd be looking at there is how do we improve the awareness and knowledge of human rights, compliance and practice of mental health? How do we get that word out there? How do we do that? That's one of the areas that we're going to look at there. Under the psychosocial model stroke recovery approach to mental health, we're looking at how do we build on and strengthen the evidence that's there for promising approaches and practices. And offering that, through that we can offer more choice and more hope so that people know recovery is possible. In having accessible, high quality, recovery orientated mental health, community-based services, this has to be the aim. We have to look at deinstitutionalization, but it has to work in a parallel process. There's no point in closing down institutions where we don't have a match with relation to having community-based mental health services available. We've seen in our own country, my own country, where we made mistakes along the way there. So in Mental Health Europe, we'll be advocating that we do this in tandem, that wherever an institution may close down, there is services available in the communities that people live in that they can access, and that there will be choice there for people. Co-creation in everything we do. Nothing about us without us. We are stronger together. Co-production, co-creation will be an underpinning principle of absolutely everything that we do in Mental Health Europe. and the stigma and discrimination, which I've talked about there, and how we're going to expand on that. And of course, sustainability. We need to look at new funding streams. We need to create new partnerships. We need to show that mental health is not a little pocket that sits in here with the departments of health, but mental health goes across departmental, cross-governmental, and we all have a right to our mental health. Thank you, Claudia. So that brought us on to looking at, so what is the mission of Mental Health Europe going into the future of the next 3 years? We want to lead in advancing a human rights, community-based, recovery-orientated, and psychosocial approach to mental health and well-being for all, and do that in a co-production or co-creative way. So the last slide I have here, and it's probably a little bit small, but it kind of shows you how we came to where we are today with the evolvement of the strategy. So we had to look forward in order to come back, to be able to be specific, and to know that for whatever strategic priority we've identified, that we will have an action plan year on year that will identify what we're going to do to achieve the outcomes that are clearly defined in the strategy. We're not going to be able to do it on our own. No one of us has the answers, but collectively, we can do this to effect change in our societies over the next 3 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Catherine. And let me now have a look at the questions that we have received. We have a few. Okay, so the first question is, with the UK exit from the EU, how will that impact our mental health provisions, investment, and collaboration with the rest of the European Union?
Oh, that's quite a question. We still, I would see, having the UK involved in Mental Health Europe as an ally, who have always worked very closely with us, who have been leaders and in the areas of our development. And we've also used practices that would have come from the UK to be able to inform us across Europe, as well as the other way around. So I don't see a change in the involvement of UK in relation to progressing what we want to do around mental health. Claudia, would you have anything, or Lushka, anything to add to that?
I think that I can add that actually it's because of this, it's more important than ever to keep really our close collaboration. Yeah. We are working as Mental Health Europe. We are, of course, working a lot with the European Union member states, but we are also working beyond that. We just had formalized our partnership with WHO Europe. So I don't see. I don't see any time soon, and probably never, how the UK will not be part of Mental Health Europe. As Catherine already said, there are really plenty of good practices, and I think that for the UK and the people that I have spoken to that are based in the UK, it is actually really important to keep this link, and we are there for that.
And I think when we look at mental health, it's bringing it back again to the human experience. We're all people, we all live in societies, and we shouldn't have the geographic boundaries when it comes to advocating for the rights of people with mental health challenges and improving the mental health of our communities. And even from the perspective of Europe, internationally, we are linking with the International Initiative for Mental Health Leadership, and we're hoping to strengthen that partnership as well. So, you know, it's mental health holds no boundaries and knows no boundaries.
Many thanks. Then there is another question. In line with improving access to mental health, it feels crucial to reduce geographical man-made boundaries, which are an obstacle to accessing therapists. One should have the right to choose the therapist of their choice anywhere in the world, or at least in Europe, for their own mental health. It is not right to restrict this choice just because of where people live. Online therapy is an option, and it should unite Europe and everyone. What are your thoughts?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm extremely passionate about recovery for people who use our mental health services. we're all at different starting points, and that's probably one of the issues. We only in the last 5 years in my own country in Ireland have really begun to see what adopting a co-production, co-creative approach to development, delivery and evaluation of mental health services can achieve. And I think that with the new strategy for Mental Health Europe, that is the aim here as well. The more information and the more equality we can bring to the conversations we have around the choices to be made available to people who do need to use our services. And probably what you're talking about there, and that online, it has opened a huge avenue for us where we're not boxed into a geographical area. I suppose what that brings with it, though, is culture comes into it, also language comes into it. So I suppose it's a conversation. It's a whole webinar on its own as to how we would do that. But I do agree with you that it is the way forward. As you said, even if it's around choice within your own community or your own country in relation to the services that you can access. But we also have to have the services that you can access. And we have to make sure that the services that are there are underpinned by strong evidence. So again, is there, Claudia or Luchka, is there anything you would like to add to that?
I think very briefly, the fact also, of course, it also includes the national systems in terms of social protection and it means and healthcare, because it means that people should be able to access therapists where they want in Europe, but also to get the support to be able to access those therapists. And I know that at the European Union level, because of course, then if you're out of the union, it gets more complicated. But they are already trying to get some standards, common standards for pension systems, for instance, to be able to transfer. And there is also some work going on in terms of transborder healthcare. So that's where Mental Health Europe can look in terms of advocacy, or where members that are interested in this specific topic can go. And so we can provide you with some more information on this, in case you're interested to do.
And Claudia, one of the other things that, of course, we have in the strategy is around that sharing of information, those exchanges. So exchanges of good practice where somebody from, if people in one country have a particular interest and some other country is doing it well, that we will work to connect people in that network and to go across and actually physically be present in that country to see how that works. In fact, I just back from Slovakia. We had a really good event in Slovakia last week around co-creation and around looking at mental health reform. And the outcome of it is that there will be some people coming over in November to our information sharing and networking event to learn a bit more. And we're delighted to learn from them as they are to learn from us. So I think strengthening those, talking to people, finding out what's happening in other areas, how have they overcome the obstacles and the barriers that have been presented? It can be a slow process, but once you educate yourself and once you find out what's working well in other areas, that can help to transfer that and translate it back into your own countries.
Okay, there are quite a few questions I will need to pick here and there, because I'm not sure that we'll be able during this event to answer them all, but we can of course get back to the people whose questions have remained unanswered. We have a person asking, I would really like to ask Catherine how Mental Health Europe, I'm sorry, because my screen has jumped. Here we go. How Mental Health Europe and indeed Mental Health Ireland are going to move beyond the medical model, as what is being described is really embedded in the medical model itself, and how you're going to hear the voice of Irish survivors who do not self-identify with psychiatric recovery within that model and who are essentially harmed as it embeds the status quo. So it's basically, the question is, there is a feeling that Mental Health Europe, Mental Health Ireland are embedding the medical model. And the question, Catherine, is how is this true? And how is this not true?
Well, I'll speak from an Irish perspective, and I have Michael Norton here, who you'll hear from later. And what we did in Ireland in the last 5 years was we co-produced a national framework for recovery. And along with the national framework recovery, we also developed the guidance documents to support service providers in understanding what the strategy meant and how to implement a recovery-focused approach within the services. As I said, it's slow. We've got early adapters, as you always do. We have champions. But one of the key things that came from it was the development of a program called the Recovery Principles and Practice Workshop, which is delivered in co-production. It was developed in co-production and delivered by a co-production team, which involves persons with lived experience, family members, and providers. And what they do is they work with the service providers to allow time specifically to reflect on the role that they play within the mental health service. Because a lot of times you're reacting, you're firefighting, you know, the demands on the service, the staff implications, all of that impacts on, although, as I said, nobody comes into mental health to become a millionaire. It's not for the money. You come in because you have a passion and because you want to do something to help your community and the people who live in it. But sometimes that gets lost in translation. So our key way of working in Ireland has been through co-production, through developing recovery principles and practice workshop, but also Mental Health Ireland have become the go-to agency to support the employment of people with lived experience and family members in order to develop recovery education services, to promote family peer support services, to develop alternatives to A&E, for example, we call them doing crisis cafes, but we call them community cafes, and we have the first one up and running, 2 more hot on the heels. It is a slow burn. It is slow. It's bringing people on board. It's demonstrating that when we work together, although it might take a little bit longer when you use co-production, what you get at the end is what people want, as opposed to what we think as service providers is what the person wants. And Michael will probably speak more to that when he's giving his piece on the panel. From a Mental Health Europe perspective, I think one of the first things that we're going to do in relation to strategy is the establishment of our task force in co-production. We need to learn from each other. And that took a while in our own country because we all bring our own perspective and we all believe our perspective is the right perspective. And what co-production and co-creation teaches us is that in understanding each other's perspective and opinions and where they're coming from and how they're deep-seated for us, this isn't an either or. It's not personal versus medical. It is about choice. It is about offering people hope. It's about chime. I live by chime. The connection, the hope, a person's sense of identity, having meaning in our lives and empowerment. And who doesn't want to make sure that everybody gets access to that? So it's really working with people to say, we're not here to take over from your role. It's about what value can your role bring to this? Because we don't have none of us, service users, families, members or providers, none of us have the answers in isolation. But we do have the answers if we come together and listen to each other. And there is always consensus needed when you do this. You have to, and it's, as I said, it'll be incremental. It'll be bringing people on slowly. I can see it in Ireland now that the boulder has gathered the moss and it's rolling up the hill and the moss is getting thicker. And that's what we need to do. And as I said, the first step for us in Mental Health Europe will be the co-production task force to be able to deliver on the actions that we are going to outline over the next 3 years. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much. And we have now time very briefly for a last question, which is how is the psychiatric community supporting the psychosocial model and having an impact in our advocacy efforts?
Okay, so I'm actually going to, from an Irish perspective, I think I've answered that. Claudia, can I bring yourself in to answer from the wider European perspective on that?
Yes, of course. Well, some of our members are actually psychiatrists, and yes, there are well, there are many schools, but there are really psychiatrists that want to embrace the way we work in terms of mental health, which is a human rights-based approach and a recovery-based approach. So in that sense, they are we have the people that are involved. And it is also true that it is important to work also with the new generations, work on education, medical educational curricula, etc., to advocate even more and to increase the understanding of this human rights type of approach. Okay, so Catherine.
And in Ireland, they did, the Irish College of Psychiatrists did adopt a position paper on the whole area of recovery and recovery approaches in mental health.
Perfect. So Catherine, thank you very much for your presentation and also for answering all of these questions. And now it is time to move on to our panel. And I would like to give the floor to Christian Gerjan, who is the Vice President of Mental Health Europe. He is a human rights expert and is also a member of the Croatian Association for Psychosocial Support. Christian, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Claudia, and thank you for this introduction of me. I welcome you all to this panel where we are going to discuss 5 strategic priorities of mental health, Europe's new strategy. These priorities are human rights-based approach to mental health, the psychosocial model to mental health services in community, co-creation with experts by experience, and mental health-related stigma and discrimination. For the beginning, I would ask all the panelists, could you please introduce yourselves? And we today have with us Rosina Spinoi, Michael Norton, Guido Valentini, Aoife Casey, and Roberto Mezzina.
Thank you, Christian. Good to be here. I'm Rosina Spinoi, as you mentioned. I'm from Scotland originally, and I've been living here in Belgium for around 21 years. I'm a design strategist and social entrepreneur. I run a small, medium-sized enterprise and an NGO of BIDS Belgium, which focuses around designing and co-designing inclusive communities. I'm also a community partner of the new European Bauhaus initiative of the Commission. And so as a creative, it's also around designing projects around inclusion, inclusive education, women empowerment, and projects that are in line with my own sort of values and beliefs. But just to add quickly, I'm also a mother of 3 teenagers, and I have a son with mental health challenges and various other challenges. And really, of course, during this period, a lot of these were exacerbated. And so I'll be sharing some of those experiences as well as some of the solutions that I think we can co-design. So thank you. I don't know if you want to just do introductions or we can say a bit more, Christian.
I will ask you questions later, but let's do introductions first now, okay? So Michael, could you introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, thank you, Christian. Hi, everyone. My name is Michael Norton. So depending on where you see me will depend on what hat I actually wear. But for this context, I'm a National Engagement and Recovery Lead with the Office of Mental Health Engagement and Recovery in the Irish Mental Health Services. I'm also a researcher myself. I do a little bit of research into co-production, co-creation, peer support, recovery, social recovery, all these kind of avenues in mental health recovery. And I'm also a person with lived experience myself. So I would have gone through mental health challenges, and I'm now thankfully well on my way in my recovery. And I hope to bring to this discussion my experiences of working in co-production along with Catherine and along with other people in the Irish services, but also bringing a little bit about my own lived experience as well.
Thank you, Michael. Now Guido.
Thank you, Christian. Hello, everybody. And thank you to Mental Health Europe for inviting me and giving us this incredible chance to share ideas and to help Mental Health Europe in the new strategy activities. My name is Guido Valentini. I am the new chair of Clubhouse Europe. I was elected last November, so I'm fresh new. And I'm also the director of Club Itaca Roma, is the first clubhouse in Rome, Italy, is where I live and where I work every day. So my main activity actually is to direct a clubhouse and to do the non-clinical rehabilitation approach that is typically from clubhouses. And I would like to tell just about my private life. I'm father of 2 young teenagers, and I'm quite passionate to what teenagers are going through in this moment with the COVID situation. And so I just share something with Rosina about teenager. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Aoife.
Hello, good morning. And thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to partake in this panel. I am a Dublin-born visual artist, currently living in the south of Spain. I have been here for over 4 years, and also I am a full-time ESL, ELT, English language teacher. I teach ages ranging from 5 up to adults, and I'm particularly interested in how I can help with somebody with lived experience, to kind of give experience and give thoughts about how things can change and what's helped me. I've been on a long journey, and I've gone through a lot of different paths, and I know what works well, what doesn't, and also the importance of yeah, like you were saying, rights for people who do have mental health difficulties, human rights, and the way that we're treated, the way that messages are put across, and the fact that somebody like me, who isn't a professional, who isn't a trained psychotherapist, to be here is really important. And yeah, I'm very happy to share what my knowledge is and what's worked for me.
Thank you. And Roberto?
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here with Mental Health Europe. I'm Roberto Mezzina. I'm a psychiatrist, retired currently from the Italian National Health Service. I was a psychiatrist in all my career in Trieste, where I worked in the experience that was started by Franco Basaglia, a famous transformation psychiatric services, and more than that, after the closure of psychiatric hospital and setting a number of community-based services, a totally alternative to the old institutions. The Italian experience, as you know, promoted a very important law in 1978 that gave back the citizenship rights to people with mental health problems, where before completely deprived in our country. Well, this is my professional experience. I also led the WHO Collaborating Center in Trieste, and after my retirement from a couple of years, I'm involved in a number of international organizations, the MHE, International Mental Health Collaborating Network, which is promoting, together with Mental Health Europe, a coalition of coalitions, because everyone now is advocating for applying a human rights and recovery-based approach. But the problem is how to implement all this good guidance we have in international policies. So we are trying to set up a range of organizations to work together toward these aims. And also I'm involved currently in the World Federation for Mental Health as a Vice Director for Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We are honored today that we have such an excellent speakers with profound, especially lived experience to participate in this panel today. Now, my first question to you all is, in your opinion, and taking into account your experience, what is the most relevant aspect of MHE's new strategic plan, and what is needed to achieve it? You can take your floor, everybody. Who wants to talk first? Aoife, I see you. This is the reason that I am asking you directly.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Well, for me, two of the ones that I really kind of gravitate towards as a person with a lived experience is, you know, the fact that education and education for young people and you know, strengthening information systems for what they have to go through is so important. And that I think is like core to moving forward in an Ireland and in a Europe where mental health is so important. For me, you know, there's just so much that has to be done. There's so far that has to come from where we are in the educational system at the moment. And I feel like it's so important that there should be more services, more education, more courses. There should be public education through wide-scale programs in schools for people who are most affected. And it's proven that, you know, teenagers are at risk, the highest risk. And that's when I first started having a lot of mental health difficulties when I was 14. And for me, that is just so important, because if I had the tools that I have now, I think it would have made such a difference to my life. And so I'm really passionate about opening the book, and, you know, opening the book for teenagers and showing them the information, showing them facts, figures, scientific research, and giving them tools and courses like cognitive behavioral therapy, they're talking about resistance, how to deal with our emotions, because, you know, it's so important for teenagers to build the tools and skills so that they have bounce in this world, because we're always going to come up against bad things that happen and good things that happen. And if they don't have the tools, then it's, you know, it's going to not work out well. They need systems in place in the educational system set up by the government to help them deal with everyday occurrences. And that for me is one of the points that I'm really passionate about.
Okay, so thank you very much for this. And from your personal experience, what gave you most support and why?
Well, giving most support in my journey and my recovery is educating myself, is finding resources online. There's been so many things in the past few years. Like, I'm so proud of Ireland, and it's come in leaps and bounds from when I was a teenager in 1990 to today. The courses that are available, but you have to find them, you know. And one of them was an amazing course by the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland. It was a 10-week course, health and happiness course. I did that. Talks on trauma series, obviously apps and things like that. The Daily Bell with Padraig O'Hearn. Like, there's so many people out there, and that's really been like, because I think it's so important with somebody who has lived experience that they're given ownership of their mental health, and they're, you know, that they're given the tools to properly conduct their own life, because it gives them a sense of worth. If I don't have that information, I can't help myself. And that's why I think that these things and these talks and these panels and all the Instagram lives that are happening over this week have been amazing.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this, for sharing your experience about the issues that you had and what helped you the most in overcoming them. Anybody else answering to the first questions? The person I see first.
Sorry.
Please go ahead.
Okay. For me, thank you. I'd just like to answer this. I think it's really also looking at the systemic level as well as the grassroots level, and the two meeting in the middle. We need to have our policies and procedures completely redesigned. I mean, being based here in Brussels, I never thought actually that, you know, I would ever face human rights violations, but indeed that's what we did with the experience that we had with our son, with forced institutionalization without inclusion of parents or a context of any family members being asked. So I think these kind of things are really the human rights approach is absolutely crucial in that level to really sort of, as I said, put pressure on national governments for this kind of deinstitutionalization. But of course, at a grassroots level, without a doubt, it's more community care that we need. We need more of a accessible, human-centric approach for community care. And that means really putting an infrastructure in place by local government where it's a support for families, it's a support for individuals, before going to a level where there's a danger of there being these grey areas within policies that allow for certain human rights abuses. And indeed, that's very much what we experienced because there was nothing in between. And coming from Scotland also over 20 years ago, my mother also had, my late mother had challenges with mental health. But we had community psychiatric nurses. There was a whole kind of Community Care Act that was put into place. So I think we need to also be looking at indeed the best practices, not just in Europe, but well beyond, of what are the preventative strategies that we can actually put into place to help families, where there's also space to share stories and to exchange those lived experiences, because that also empowers communities. So that's just something that I would certainly suggest. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for telling us. Now, Roberto, you wanted to say something as well?
Yes, thank you. Well, I think it's, first of all, I would like to congratulate with Mental Health Europe for this great document, which sets the scene for the next 3 years. I completely agree with the topics. And the problem is that, of course, these are common names for many organizations, including the World Health Organization, which is in a way converging on some of these issues. The problem is how to make it realistically applied. What are the steps? Of course, for instance, the issue of the institutionalization, according to my experience, is a key issue that is a little bit put aside in international declaration. And in the moment, even the big institution proved to be very harmful in this pandemic. People in residential care were suffering the most with infection. They died much more than the others. And so the social exclusion increased within this institution and the loss of human rights as well as outside for people in the streets. So I think the issue of social inequality is becoming something very relevant. And it's not a case that the Mental Health Day is focused on mental health in an unequal world. So I'm very much impressed that you raised the issue of intersectionality. So the nature of interconnected nature of social categories or categorization like race, class, gender, etc., because they overlap in creating more and more inequality. And so it's important to raise the issue of the vulnerable population as well. So these are the population we must take care most. And look how we can empower them, how we can address social inequalities. And this requires an action, not just at the level of the policies, but also at the level of services, because services can make a difference because they work on turf, they work on the basic level, and they must be much more inclusive. Or with open doors, they must be integrating psychosocial approaches within their range of offer. they must work for human rights and for civil and political and social rights of people. That means housing, work, all the issues related to the environment and the material conditions of living, which are so important, demonstrated by COVID. So we need more integrated approach. I think this strategic plan is very useful in this direction. Also, we need to include the psychosocial perspective within the services to contrast the medical model, but also to empower people, because the representation of people with lived experience and also with other kind of knowledge like social approaches is within the services, this can be really contaminate the medical model. So we need a different nature of services to be developed to move from the psychiatric services to mental health or psychosocial disability services, as someone suggested before. So I think we need to implement this wide contamination, focus on deinstitutionalization, because the money is there. So the huge amount of resources are within institutions. We must unfrozen those resources and move to community-based services. And so, because these are very useful in moving the powers toward more and more close to people's needs. Yes, and I think that it's very important that Mental Health Europe can address, engage policymakers. This is the role at the level of European Union, which is very, very important. So I think this is key. So how we can work to make it possible in terms of traducing this big concepts in policies and in practices within the services, not forgetting that we need to change the thinking, we need to change the practice, and we need to change the service, the services themselves. So it's a circular issue, as we underlined as the International Mental Health Collaborating Network. So finally, capacity building is the product of all this. So making people become capable to apply a different approach, which is based on human rights and person rights and person focus, must be in a cascade from the policies to the real practice.
Thank you very much, Roberto, for this for your reflection on the MHE strategy and of the strengths of our strategy. Now we have Michael and Guido in Tombola. Who is going to go first, or I should just?
I'd like to go first, if that's okay. So thanks, Christian. To be honest, when I read this strategy, this new strategy, I got very, very excited. It was great to see how things are moving towards the way they should be. One of the things that I think is really important, especially as we come out of these COVID times, is making sure that we bring the services, all services within Europe, to all together to the one place. So I know that in pockets around Europe, there's areas that have very good recovery-oriented practice. There's also areas that are very are still with those asylums and the big hospitals and so on. And I suppose COVID had the negative effect in some ways of actually, we need to try and maintain what we have because we couldn't go any further because of COVID and the way COVID kind of spelled out. But now that we've emerged from COVID and we're beginning to emerge from COVID, I think it's very important that we now get all the services in Europe aligned together, so that no matter where you go to seek seek care or anything like that within Europe, that you're getting the same recovery-orientated care and human rights-based approach to care as you would in other parts of Europe. Obviously, I suppose from my own research interest, I really like Strategic Priority 4, which is very much about co-creation and co-production. And I think it links back to what we were saying about bringing everything together and making sure that everyone is on the same plate I think it's so important to involve people with lived experience, but also their family members and carers in the whole process of moving the services and moving everything towards where we want to be, in recovery oriented, in the land of recovery orientation and the land of human rights, and that we're all there together, working together in harmony, and we're all equal in that relationship. And that's the whole essence of co-creation and co-production, which I'm sure I'll get into a little bit more later on as well. So I suppose in answering your question, Christian, there's two main strategy points that I really think is very important for us as we move forward. Is making sure that we all get a human rights-based approach to mental health services, but also including the service user, the family member, the care, all in that journey as well, because they have equal knowledge to that of the service provider.
Thank you, Michael, for this. And since it is a very significant question for us, I would ask you, perhaps you know the answer. What is the key to successful co-creation?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I suppose the real way to answer that question is to kind of give you an idea of co-creation in the whole sense of the co-production realm. So co-creation and co-production in some areas are split. I know in Norway, for example, I'm working with a colleague in Norway at the minute around this whole idea of co-production and co-creation. And co-creation is separate from co-production, whereas in Ireland, co-creation and co-production are the one thing. Their co-creation is part of co-production. And I suppose when we're looking at trying to, the key aspects for success in co-production, it's really about having that commitment from everyone in the organization, not just the service providers, but also the service users, the family members, carers, allowing them to realize that they have something to offer. They have something to bring to the table as well as the service providers. So I think that organizational readiness to embrace the knowledge that people that with lived experience have, along with people that have learned experience from reading it in a textbook, I think that is so, so important. The other aspect of the thing is, you know, and it's one of the things that's keep coming up in Ireland and we're trying to address, I suppose, is this whole idea of, you know, there's staff there that are paid to be there and to be in the co-productive relationship. And then there's others who are service users, maybe service family members, carers, who not necessarily getting paid for their time to do that. And as such, that needs to be equaled out a little bit. And I think that's really, really important. And as Catherine is kind of sharing to everyone as well, we have guidance documents that support us in co-production and making co-production a reality. And I think they are really, really important because they help us ground us into, okay, what are the principles of co-production and how can we actually move this forward? So I know it's a very long-winded answer to your question, Christian, but I suppose it's having that organizational commitment, both from to be able to listen to the voice experience, but also having respecting them in that sense, if that makes sense.
So thank you so much for this answer. I don't mind it being long. It is very helpful, and this is just what we need in the Mental Health Europe as well, to hear the concrete examples how things can be made and how to move forward. And now, last but not least, winner of our first question round is Guido. Guido, are you there? No?
Yes, I'm here. Sorry, I had my microphone off. So thank you, Christian. Yes, Mental Health Europe new strategy looks to me quite broad and ambitious as planned. And I think that's right. We need to think wide and in an ambitious way, especially if we want to make the difference in this society that is so keen on waste and on giving people less respect. And with the COVID situation, those diversity came out. So we have to make the difference and overcome this society of waste, this society of anxiety. But how can we do this? So in the strategy that Mental Health Europe proposed, I think that it's very important to implement good practice in the institutionalization and go toward community-based centers approaches. This is something that makes the difference. You know, like Mental Health Europe, also Clubhouse Europe, we represent several members from different countries in Europe, and each country has his own history and his own culture, his own approach to mental health. So, like in Ireland, it's different than in Italy, than in Norway, and we have to adopt our approaches. So I think it's important to have one score that put together all of us. And to me, the deinstitutionalization, sorry, the word is very hard for me to pronounce, but you understand what I'm talking about. It's one of the first goals that we have to realize, and it will make the difference. We will leave the sign in mental health in Europe. So we should concentrate on, you know, one big goal that unite all of us. How can we do this? Because it's not so easy. I think we, like in the Mental Health Europe new strategies, they say that we have to reinforce our network as members, because we represent a lot of people. We are also full citizen that vote, you know, for the European elections. So on one level, we should try to be more well represented and to let know to our policymakers that we bring a lot of votes. So listen to us. And this is on a very high level, on a European Union level, like in Brussels, and on a lower level, in each country where we are, we can, you know, represent our on a smaller scale, we can represent our goal. I'm happy that here with us there is Roberto Mezzina, because in Italy we have the Basaglia law, that is a good practice, not very well known, not very well applicated, but still has a lot to say. So we have somebody that can give us some good idea and some good practice. So let's reinforce our network as Mental Health Europe members with this kind of goal, this kind of issues. Then you ask also about what is needed to achieve Mental Health Europe new strategic plan. I think we have to go from a further framework, from a greater framework to some very concrete steps. And in my little experience, I can tell you that we have some very concrete projects like Partners in Care. It's a project that helps psychiatric and young psychiatric in the university, but also in the hospital to know better the Clubhouse approach, that is a psychosocial approach. So we go to talk with them and we try to help them to know better our approach, so they choose the psychosocial approach and not the medical approach. And then we have also practical programs to help our members in the clubhouse to reach a job inclusion, a real job inclusion, because it's really important at the end for a person. What is important to do the rehabilitation, to have a job, to have a role in our society. So, you know, that's what I mean. Looking at the
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I need to be mindful of the time, and I'm sorry that I'm not able to give you more time to speak, but we are also having questions from the audience, and I still do have many questions for you all, and I would rather spend the whole day with you than doing anything else, but still I need to be mindful of the time. So if you could perhaps stop at this moment here and then perhaps answer then what you wanted to say further when I ask the further questions. Is that okay with you?
Oh yes, of course. Thank you. I was finishing anyway. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I would ask all of you now, what would be your recommendation and expectation for the EU institution vis-a-vis mental health in the next 4 years? And that having in mind what Mental Health Europe can also do to achieve these goals. Is there anybody who would want to start first?
Rosina?
Yeah. I would say the role certainly of the EU institutions is to put more pressure on the national governments actually, and to call out, you know, when there are human rights abuses, even though of course we've got the EU Court of Justice there. But I think there needs to be more pressure to be put on to local governments. And also, I think certain programs, I mean, I mentioned, of course, I'm a community partner of this new European Bauhaus, and Michael mentioned also about the co-design. I think the co-designing aspect, certainly the institutions can certainly help with, and working not just, of course, with an intersectional lens and an inclusive lens, but also transversally, because mental health affects every sector. So I think there should be more of an integrated strategy from the EU to work transversely, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I will go. In general, as like I said, I would love to see a more solid and real framework put into the educational system for teenagers, especially. I think that's probably the number one for me. It's like start where everything starts, and it starts with children and the youth, and being able to educate them about how to deal with life, and giving them the resources, and destigmatizing discussions about mental health, and having people with lived experience go into schools. And there's just so many therapies out there that need to be shared and talked about. And then in terms of just the strategic priority number 4, obviously people with lived experience would be ideal people to work alongside medical professionals, because I've had a lot of negative experiences in hospitals, especially in Spain, and I feel like there's not the training there or the awareness. So I think that working closely with alternative practitioners on a more community-based level, so that A&E isn't the option that you have to go to. So that basically is a lot of work in itself, like community-based projects, groups, meetings, sharing ideas, and using technology, like it said in the priority. It was like using technology, having a support system, having group meetings, like Rosina said, like, meetings together with family members. Or why isn't that happening on a more community-based level? it would stop so much unnecessary trips and unnecessary stress for people, everybody involved. And I really feel like that has to be covered as well. So.
Thank you very much for this. And I also wanted to say that education is one of the new key objectives of the Mental Health Europe strategy. So we are just taking account and want to do many more activities in regards to education as well. Any other responses on the question regarding the European Union, or I should go on?
Well, I suppose for me, Christian, sorry for interrupting.
Okay.
For me, I feel that, you know, I'd like to see, like, we've come so far in areas, we've come so far in the recovery movement. And I'd really like to see that expanding. You know, we're now having, like in the Irish services, for example, we have the HSE Mental Health Engagement and Recovery Office, which is focused on recovery, but it's also focused on engagement with service users, family members, and carers. But we are very, very closely aligned to the good work that Mental Health Ireland does, and how we work together in partnership. And I think that model that we have, that Mental Health Ireland and HSE Mental Health Engagement and Recovery working together towards implementing the recovery-oriented initiatives, is really, really powerful and useful in our service anyway. And I think maybe from the backdrop of these strategic priorities, maybe it's about local mental health services working with the mental health associations or mental health groups like Mental Health Ireland to support the rollout of these initiatives, because I know that has been invaluable in our service. I'd also really would love to see the emphasis made on co-production, and I know that Catherine in her speech earlier was talking a little bit about, you know, a European-wide co-production initiative or consortium, if that makes sense. And I think that's really, really timely and really needed, so that we can all work together to create the mental health experience that we want for people, and show that recovery can be a reality. It's a journey, it's a long-term journey that's going to take many years, you know, but showing that, yes, recovery is possible for anyone who has a mental health challenge. For a family member who has a loved one with a mental health challenge, there is recovery possible for them too. And I think that's really, really important for us to show.
Okay, thank you. So Roberto?
Yes, well, I don't think that the European Union has done so much for mental health till now. So we have to press this institution to make it more achievable, a number of objectives. And for instance, talking about Italy, there is no impact, zero impact of the European Union on mental health. This is a recognition of what happened. So I don't want to dream so much. I would like to be practical. So it's important to focus on very practical issues. That's why I'm underlying that Europe must take a position about services, because services must implement the CRPD in the real practice. It's not just advocating for rights, it's important to apply human rights in the practice day to day. So decentralization must be combined to a human rights perspective and demonstrate that we can transform and translate the principles into practices. For instance, with no restraint practices, with open door services, and also providing comprehensive alternatives, not just specific limited alternatives, for instance, for crisis, but an overall change of the system. This is the utopia where we should work for. And I think it's possible to do it and demonstrate that we have now the knowledge, we have the practice of professionals, people using services, carers, and the whole society to make a huge advancement, a huge jump, a huge step into this direction of human rights. But we must press to translate this in practical directions for policies. Otherwise, this will remain at the level of words.
Thank you very much, Roberto. And now I will have to skip to the question and answers part before giving my last question to you all, because we are having less than we're having actually 6 minutes to questions and answers. So I selected 2 questions from the audience. And first comes from Himani Shah, who asks, it is important not to have policies coming from a place of mindset wherein one is thinking of a prison instead of a health recovery center. The mindset needs to change. What are your thoughts about it?
Can I just jump to that one very quickly? I think indeed we need a completely different mindset. And there was something there I was thinking of when it was the previous question. When I was thinking organizations, even like the World Health Organization, they tapped into the creative sector when we had the pandemic to come up with solutions for visualizations to get the communication across about the pandemic. And I'm thinking it's exactly that is what we need. We need a creative, out of the box thinking mindset. And we need to, hence why I say work outside, connect with those also outside of the sector. So we can have more of this creative mindset and out of the box thinking. Thanks.
Thank you. And the second question from the audience comes from Chris Frederick, and it is about education. There is some debate among my mental well-being advocacy peer group in the UK that the area of mental health should be introduced to the actual school curriculum. What are your thoughts about it? Funding, facilitation, stigma, etc. Michael, I saw you nodding. Perhaps you know the answer.
Yeah, I don't know if I know the answer, but I have an opinion on it. And I have to say, I totally agree that, you know, we should be learning about mental health in schools and how to maintain positive mental health in schools. I know for myself in my own recovery journey, if I knew about how to look after my mental health and to keep it okay, then the likelihood of me having problems would have been substantially reduced. You know, I believe it should be in the school curriculums because, you know, we learn as we grow, and it's one thing that is missing at the minute is actually learning about how do we actually look after ourselves, our mental health. I know in Ireland there's a secondary school kind of module, if you want to call it that, that's called SPHE, which is looking about physical health and sexual health and all that. But there's no real mention of mental health and how you can look after yourself that way. But also reducing the stigma in terms of it as well. We need to start at school age and helping them learn about this. So I think in general, I don't know if it's an answer, but I think I totally agree that we need to have mental health as part of the school curricula somehow.
Thank you. Aoife?
Yeah, I just want to piggyback off Michael again, just in terms of the wellness program, the free Royal College of Ireland course, this is actually a 10-week course just started, especially for teenagers. And I, as a teacher, have been following it, downloading it, watching the videos, and I've implemented it in my classroom with my teens. And this just gives you an idea, like teenagers, depending on the group, of course, but teenagers really, really love taking 5 minutes at the beginning of class, doing breath work, writing down a gratitude, something they're grateful for, something they want to change, something they're going to work on, like things like this. It takes 5 minutes. You know, it's in English, so I can say it's part of my English language teaching, but this should be taught alongside science classes. You know, there's different ways that the kids in school can work with other people in the community, like people in nursing homes. You can do canine therapy in places where there's dog refuge. You know, there's just endless things that can be done. And definitely, I'm 100% sure that if I had more resources when I was younger, like there's a few now in Ireland that are amazing. A Lust for Life, Spun Out, Jigsaw, or to name a few. Like they should be being promoted on every street corner and talked about. There should be WhatsApp groups about mental health for kids. There should be support groups after school. It should be cool. It should be something talked about, and that's just imperative.
Yeah.
Thank you, Eva. We have only 1 minute left, but I don't think that Claudia will mind if I take a few minutes from her closing remarks. For the last question I have to you, some of you and your respective organizations are already MHE members. Some of you are not, but I use this opportunity to invite you to join us. In any case, if you are interested in further work with MHE, how would you see your contribution in the implementation of the MHE strategy?
I suppose for me, Christian, I think for me it's that continuous liaison between the health services here in Ireland and Mental Health Ireland and Mental Health Europe, because there's I think someone said it earlier, you're nothing without us kind of thing, you know. We're all in this together, but also for me as a person, as a researcher, as a national engagement and recovery lead, promoting recovery orientated practices and co-production within my remit, which is in Ireland, is so important, and building those connections with like-minded partners like Mental Health Ireland, Mental Health Europe, Jigsaw, all those partners. Building those connections is really important as well. And I suppose that's what I can do from an Irish point of view. In a European or a European context, as I said earlier, I'm very much an avid researcher. I love researching. And one of the things I think is imperative for the continuous growth of this practice is to show that there is an evidence base behind such practices. There's an evidence base behind co-production. There's an evidence base behind recovery. And that's what I'm working towards at the minute as well.
Thank you, Michael. Anybody else? Or do I have to play Tomball again?
Maybe I think Roberto raised his hand.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see it. Thank you, Roberto.
Just quickly, of course, we are closing, but I think, well, I worked for 40 years in a 50-year experience in Trieste, which is considered to be a model. I don't believe in models, but I believe that there are principles and practices that can be maybe shared, and among many places across the world, there are very interesting practices. We need to create a network of exchanges, and also within the organization that we founded some years ago called the International Mental Health Collaborating Network I mentioned before, we experienced a new way of learning together, including all stakeholders, not just professionals, but people with lived experience, carers, and also members of civil society, called Actual Learning Sets, that has an organic way of progressing toward improving mental health services in a given community. So I think we need this kind of experiences to share what is needed, to share positive examples, and to develop a common strategy altogether. We need to be very practical in using our experiences, previous experiences. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roberto. And I must say that the Trieste model is always used as an inspiration when we talk about the institutionalization and how the human rights-based services could be provided in the community. Thank you. And now, Guido, you are last but not least. Please do answer.
Yes, today I'm last but not least. Very quickly, I agree with Roberto. We have to be quite concrete. And Mental Health Europe owns a great network with a lot of members that are experts, each one of us in some part of the complexity of our approaches. So from my point of view as Clubhouse Europe chair, I can tell that we are very good in job inclusion for people with a mental illness, mental health history. And for instance, in Norway, we are experimenting some new project for teenagers and school dropouts. So we might share this kind of expertises. And I think Mental Health Europe can collect our contribution and share between all of us.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your contributions today. It was lovely to speak to you. I'm sorry that we are not having more time, but this is how it is. It usually with online meetings, very often it happens that after some time people get tired. So probably we would also get tired as well. But it was very interesting discussion and And now I am turning back to Claudia, who will give you some closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Christian, for your great sharing of this session, and thanks to all the panelists and to Catherine before you for all of your contributions and for making this such an interesting event and answering the questions and making such a lively contribution. I think that it is clear from what you have said and also from what people were telling us via the Q&A and the chats that there is really this need to move beyond these urgency-driven medical solutions and instead adopting public health, human rights, recovery-oriented when recovery, the meaning of recovery, it's very individual. And some people might not want to use the word recovery, and that is fine. Psychosocial approach to mental health. And this is why we have renovated our commitment to work in a holistic way that puts human rights and people with lived experience at the center of our actions. We are looking forward to working with you to improve mental health and well-being for all. But I think that the best way to close this event is to do it with the words written by an expert by experience and a great supporter of recovery, human rights, and co-creation. And I will give the floor to Catherine for this. Thanks.
I literally just sprung this on Claudia because I was listening to the conversations. And we had a human rights webinar for World Mental Health Day. And as we all know, this year's title was Mental Health for All in an Unequal World. And Billy Clark, Billy is a recovery educator in the Mayo Recovery College in Ireland. He's also someone who has lived experience of mental health challenges, but also now a family member of someone who is now going through their mental health challenges. He's an amazing man from how he manages to portray the whole area of human rights, mental health, recovery. And he wrote a poem for us for the event we had last week. And listening to everybody today, I just thought it would be nice to finish up on it and for you to listen to the words, because I think this is what we all want for everyone. None of our experiences are the same, but we have to keep positive, keep optimistic, know that if we work together, we can and will affect changes for people who do encounter or who do live with mental health challenges. It makes a better society for us all. So Billy's poem is called "Oh, to be free like a bird, to cast my shadow upon the earth and to be seen in all my spectacular beauty and frailty, to be seen. Oh, to be free like a bird, sing my truth in the cacophony of the day, and to be heard by hearts curious and warm, to be heard. Oh, to be free like a bird, to make my home wherever I may choose, and be safe on my own, with my own, to be safe. Oh, to be free like a bird, to be woven into the tapestry of life and take part with dignity and heart, to take part. Oh, to be free like a bird, to know that I and you are the same, to be recognized and not to fight and campaign, not to have to fight and campaign for every morsel of freedom, to be recognized. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Have a great day.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.
You as well. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.